The prisoner should have been screaming by now. Commander Liravel stood before the containment cell with her hands clasped behind her back and her silver eyes fixed on the creature inside. Her scales rippled with colors of confusion and irritation. As she watched him sit there on the cold metal bench like he was waiting for a transport shuttle and not his own death. 3 rotations had passed since her crew captured the human vessel near the periphery. The battle had been short and brutal. His crewmates had fought hard, but they were outmatched from the start. The Silithian warship Void's Embrace had torn through their shields like paper and left nothing but wreckage floating in the dark. Only this one had survived. Captain Marcus. Cole was his name according to the recovered ship logs. He was a cargo runner who had wandered too far into contested space. A foolish mistake that would cost him everything. Laravel had seen countless prisoners in her 300 years of service. She had watched the mighty Korthax warriors weep like children when they realized their fate. She had seen the telepathic Quilori go mad from fear before the interrogators even touched them. The Dravati with their armored hides and Poison Claws would beg for mercy after just one session in the processing chambers. But this human simply sat there with his hands folded in his lap. He was watching her too. His brown eyes moved across her face with something that looked almost like curiosity. There was no hatred in his gaze and no terror. He looked at her the way one might look at a strange animal in a cage. Did he not understand what was happening? She stepped closer to the energy barrier that separated them. The blue light hummed and crackled between them as she studied his face. He was an unremarkable specimen by any galactic standard. Soft skin that could be torn by the smallest blade. No claws or fangs or protective scales. His body was fragile and his lifespan was laughably short. How had such a weak species ever crawled out of their gravity well? You will be transferred to the processing station tomorrow, she said through the translator embedded in her throat. Do you understand what that means? The human tilted his head slightly. I have an idea, he replied in that strange flat voice of his. Then you know that no one returns from processing. I figured as much. She waited for the crack in his calm exterior. She waited for the trembling hands or the quickening breath. She waited for the moment when the reality of his situation would finally break through whatever wall he had built inside. His mind, it did not come. You are billions of light years from your homeworld. She pressed. Your crewmates are dead. Your ship is destroyed. You have no allies and no hope of rescue. The Silithian Empire has conquered 1,000 worlds, and your species is nothing but a footnote in our records. Marcus nodded slowly. That all sounds accurate. And yet you sit there like you were waiting for dinner. Something flickered across his face. Was that amusement? Would you prefer I pace around and pull my hair out? Laravel felt her crest rise with frustration. This was not how prisoners behaved. This was not how any living creature behaved when faced with certain death. There were rules to these things. There was an order to the universe that this human was somehow violating. You should be afraid, she said. Should I? Yes, every species fears death. It is the most basic instinct in all of existence. The human leaned back against the wall and looked up at the ceiling. His expression grew thoughtful in a way that made her scales itch. Fear is a funny thing, he said quietly. It only has power when you have something to lose. You have your life to lose. Do I? He lowered his gaze back to her. I lost my crew 3 days ago. I lost my ship and my cargo and my mission. I am stuck in a cell on an alien warship heading towards something called processing, which I assume is not a day spa. A small smile crossed his lips. What exactly do I have left to fear losing? Laravel had no answer for that. She stood there in silence as the question hung between them. In all her years, she had never encountered a creature who could speak about their own death with such casual acceptance. It was unnatural. It was wrong. It was fascinating. The processing station will extract everything from your mind, she said after a long pause. Every memory and every secret. They will take apart your consciousness piece by piece until nothing remains. It is not a quick death. I appreciate the warning. You appreciate it? Well, yes. It is useful information. Now I know what to expect. Her claws scraped against her palms as she clenched her fists. You are the strangest creature I have ever encountered. I get that a lot. She wanted to reach through the barrier and shake him. She wanted to crack open his skull and see what was wrong with his brain. How could any being be so infuriatingly calm in the face of oblivion? I will return tomorrow before your transfer, she heard herself say. I want to understand you before you are gone. The human raised an eyebrow. Is that normal? Do commanders usually chat with their prisoners? No, it is not normal at all. Then why? Laravel turned away from the cell. Because she did not have an answer. She walked toward the door with her scales shifting through shades of purple and gray. Confusion and curiosity mixed together in her chest like poison. Because you confuse me, she admitted without looking back. And I do not like being confused. The door hissed open before her. Commander? She paused at the threshold. Thank you for the viewport, Marcus said. It is nice to see the stars. She had ordered that viewport installed yesterday. She had told herself it was standard procedure for long-term prisoners, but they both knew that was a lie. Get some rest, human, she said as she stepped through the door. Tomorrow will be your last day. Then I had better make it count. The door closed behind her, and Laravel stood alone in the corridor. Her hearts were beating faster than they should. Her mind was racing with questions she could not answer. Who was this creature? And why did his peace terrify her more than any scream ever could? The morning alarm echoed through the ship. Laravel opened her eyes and found herself still sitting on the floor outside the human cell. She had not meant to fall asleep. She had not slept so deeply in decades. Across the barrier, Marcus was awake. As well, he was standing by the viewport, watching the processing station fill the view. His face was calm, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. Even the bravest soul could not look at that place without feeling something. It is time, she said. I know. She stood up slowly. Her body ached from sleeping on the hard floor, but her mind was clearer than it had been in centuries. Something had changed inside her during the night. Something fundamental. The transport will be here within the hour. She continued. Standard procedure requires me to hand you over to the processing officers personally. I understand. No, you do not. She walked to the control panel beside the cell door. Her claws hovered over the buttons as her heart pounded. In her chest, what she was about to do would destroy everything she had built. Her career, her reputation, her place in the Empire. But those things did not matter anymore. She pressed the button and the energy barrier flickered and died. Marcus stared at her in shock. What are you doing? Something stupid. Something that will probably get me killed. She stepped aside and gestured toward the open door. But something that feels right. And you taught me that right feelings matter more than safe choices. Laravel, do not argue with me. We do not have time. She grabbed his arm and pulled him out of the cell. There is an escape pod on the lower deck. It is small and old, but it has enough fuel to reach the neutral zone. From there you can find passage back to human space. Why are you doing this? She stopped in the corridor and turned to face him. Her silver eyes met his brown ones, and for a moment neither of them breathed. Because you gave me a gift last night. You gave me a new way of seeing the world. And I cannot repay that by sending you to die. This will ruin you. No, letting you die would ruin me. This will save me. She started moving again, pulling him along behind her. I have spent 3 100 years following orders and climbing ranks and serving an empire that treats life as a resource to be harvested. And for what? So that I could look back at the end and see nothing but duty? The empire will hunt you. Let them hunt. I have 200 years left, and I intend to spend them living. Really living, not just existing. They reached a junction, and she pulled him down a narrow side corridor. You showed me what that looks like. You showed me that a life full of love and loss is worth more than a life full of safety and emptiness. They passed through a maintenance section and down a ladder. The escape pod bay was just ahead. Laravel could see the small vessels lined up in their launch cradles. Take the third. 1. She said, "It is the fastest." The launch codes are standard military sequence. 77392. Marcus grabbed her hand and stopped her. Come with me. What? Come with me. Leave all of this behind and come with me. His eyes were desperate now. You do not have to stay here. You do not have to be a part of this empire anymore. Come to human space. Start over. I cannot. Why not? Because someone has to stay and change things from the inside. She squeezed his hand. You taught me that every kindness creates more kindness. Every love creates more love. If I run away, I can only save myself. But if I stay, I can save others. I can make sure that the next human who falls into our hands has a chance. They will figure out what you did. They will punish you. Then I will face that punishment. She smiled, and it felt strange on her face. She could not remember the last time she had smiled. But I will face it knowing that I finally did something that mattered. Something real. Footsteps echoed in the corridor behind them. The crew was waking up. Soon they would notice that the prisoner was missing. Go, Laravel said. Go now before it is too late. Marcus pulled her into an embrace. It was awkward and clumsy, because humans and Silithians were not shaped the same way. But it was also warm and real and precious. I will not forget you, he whispered. Against her scales. For whatever time I have left, I will carry you with me. And I will carry you. For 200 years or 2 days or however long I have. She pulled back and looked at his face one last time. Now go. Create ripples. Live. He climbed into the escape pod and strapped himself in. His hands moved over the controls, and the engines hummed to life. Through the small window, she could see him looking back at her. Laravel? Yes? Thank you for asking the question. Thank you for wanting to understand. Thank you for answering. The pod door sealed shut. The launch cradle rotated toward the bay doors. Alarms began to sound as the system detected an unauthorized departure. Laravel stood there and watched. The bay. Doors opened and the void of space rushed in. The escape pod shot forward like a silver seed cast into an infinite garden. It grew smaller and smaller until it was just a point of light among the stars. And then it was gone. The alarms continued to wail. Footsteps thundered in the corridors. Voices shouted orders and questions. In moments they would find her. In moments they would know what she had done. But Laravel did not move. She stood at the viewport and watched the stars. Somewhere out there a human was flying toward home. A human who had taught her more in 3 days than she had learned in 300 years. She thought about his words. She thought about ripples spreading across the universe. She thought about love and loss and the precious weight of moments, and she smiled. Whatever came next, she would face it without fear. Not because she was brave, not because she did not care about living, but because she had finally learned what living meant. The guards burst into the bay with weapons drawn. They shouted at her to surrender. They demanded explanations. She turned to face them with her hands raised and her heart full. I am not afraid, she said. And for the first time in her very long life, it was completely true. She told herself she would not go back. Laravel had duties to attend to and reports to file, and a ship full of crew members who needed her leadership. She was a commander of the Silithian Empire with 300 years of service and a reputation that made enemies tremble. She did not have time to waste on a single human prisoner who would be dead within the rotation. And yet she found herself standing outside his cell again. The night cycle had dimmed the lights throughout the ship, and most of the crew had retired to their quarters. Only the skeleton watch remained at their stations, and none of them questioned why their commander was wandering the detention level at such a late hour. Marcus was sitting by the viewport when the door opened. The starlight painted his face in shades of silver and blue as he turned to look at her. He did not seem surprised to see her. "Could not sleep?" he asked. "Silithians do not require as much rest as humans." "That was not what I asked." She stepped inside and let the door close behind her. The energy barrier between them hummed softly in the quiet. "No," she admitted. "I could not sleep." "Me neither. Though I suppose that makes sense given the circumstances." Laravel moved closer to the barrier. She studied his face in the dim light and tried to understand what made him so different from every other prisoner she had ever held. His features were soft and his body was weak, but there was something in his eyes that she could not name. "I have been reading about your species," she said. "The Imperial archives contain extensive files on humanity." "Anything interesting?" "Confusing. Your species makes no sense." Marcus laughed. It was a warm sound that seemed completely out of place in a detention cell. "We get that a lot too. You have no natural weapons. Your skin tears easily, and your bones break under moderate pressure. You cannot see in the dark or hear beyond a narrow range of frequencies. You have no telepathy or empathic abilities. By every measure of galactic evolution, you should have gone extinct millions of years ago. And yet here we are." "Yes. And that is what confuses me." She began to pace along the length of the barrier. The Quilori survived because they could sense predators before they attacked. The Korthax evolved armor that could stop plasma fire. The Dravati developed venom that could kill a creature 10 times their size. Every successful species in the galaxy has some advantage that allowed them to survive. And humans have none of those things. Exactly. So how did you survive? How did you crawl out of your caves and build ships and spread across 3 star systems in less than 1,000 years? Marcus was quiet for a moment. He turned back toward the viewport and watched the stars drift slowly past. "Can I tell you a story?" he asked. "If it answers my question. There was a time on Earth when humans lived alongside other species similar to us. Neanderthals and Denisovans and others. They were stronger than us. Their bones were thicker and their muscles were denser. In a fight, they would have crushed us without breaking a sweat. What happened to them? They died out. All of them. And we survived." Laravel stopped pacing. "How?" "Because we could do something they could not. We could look at a cliff and imagine a bridge. We could look at a river and imagine a boat. We could look at the cold and imagine fire." He turned back to face her. "We could look at the impossible and refuse to accept it. That is not a survival advantage. That is delusion, is it?" His eyes held hers through the barrier. "Your species lives for 500 years. You have technology that can crack planets and shields that can stop stars. You have conquered 1,000 worlds and built an empire that spans the galaxy. Yes, and you are still afraid." The words hit her like a physical blow. Her scales flushed dark purple and her crest flattened against her skull. "I am not afraid." "Then why do you keep coming back here? Why does my calm disturb you so much?" He stood up slowly and walked toward the barrier. "You have all the power in this situation. You have the ships and the weapons and the army. I am just one human in a cage. And yet something about me keeps you awake at night. You are a puzzle, nothing more. No, I am a mirror, and you do not like what you see. Laravel wanted to argue, but the words would not come. She stood there in the blue light of the barrier and felt something cold creeping through her chest. It was an unfamiliar sensation, and she did not like it. Your species builds empires because you are afraid of being forgotten, Marcus continued. You conquer worlds because you are afraid of being weak. You live for centuries and spend every moment terrified that it will end. Every species fears death, yes, but not every species lets that fear control them. And humans do not? He smiled that strange soft smile of his. We cannot afford to. We only get 80 years if we are lucky. 80 years to love and lose and learn and grow. If we spent all that time being afraid, we would never live at all. The ship hummed around them. Somewhere in the distance, a door opened and closed. The stars continued their slow dance outside the viewport. I do not understand you, Laravel said finally. I know. I have lived 300 years, and I have never met anyone like you. I will take that as a compliment. She should leave. She should return to her quarters and put this strange human out of her mind. Tomorrow he would be gone, and none of this would matter. But she could not make herself move. Ask me tomorrow, Marcus said as if he could read her thoughts. Before they take me, ask me the question you really want to ask. What question? You know what question. You have been circling around it since we first met. He sat back down on the bench and folded his hands in his lap. Ask me tomorrow, and I will give you an honest answer. I promise. She stood there for a long moment. Then, without another word, she turned and walked out of the cell. The door closed behind her, and she leaned against the wall in the empty corridor. Her hearts were racing again, and she knew that sleep would not come tonight. The final night came too quickly. Laravel stood at the observation deck and watched the processing station grow larger in the viewport. It was a massive structure of black metal and harsh lights that hung in the void like a mechanical spider. Ships docked along its arms and departed in steady streams. The business of Empire never stopped. Tomorrow morning, the transport would take Marcus Cole from her ship and deliver him to that station. She would file her report and move on to the next mission. The human would become nothing but a number in the Imperial records, and she would never see him again. The thought should not have bothered her. She had sent countless prisoners to processing over the centuries. Some had been warriors, and some had been criminals, and some had been innocent people who simply found themselves on the wrong side of the Empire. She had never lost sleep over any of them. But this one was different. She left the observation deck and walked through the quiet corridors of her ship. Her crew moved out of her way and saluted as she passed, but she barely noticed them. Her mind was elsewhere. Her mind was in a cell on the detention level where a strange human was waiting for her. The door hissed open and Marcus looked up from his bench. Starlight from the viewport fell across his face and made his eyes shine. He smiled when he saw her. I wondered if you would come. You said to ask tomorrow. It is tomorrow. Technically, it is still tonight. The station does not dock until morning. She stepped inside and let the door close. The ship was quiet around them. Most of the crew was asleep, and the night watch would not disturb their commander. They were alone in a way they had not been before. Why did you tell me to wait? She asked. Because some questions deserve a proper answer, and some answers are easier to give when time is short. You speak in riddles. I speak in truths. Humans often wrap truth in riddles because the naked thing is too sharp to hold. Laravel moved to the viewport and stood beside the barrier. From here, she could see the processing station clearly. It looked like a wound in the fabric of space, a dark thing that swallowed light and life. Have you ever watched someone die? She asked without turning around. Yes, many times. How do you bear it? You do not bear it. You carry it. There is a difference. She turned to look at him. He was still sitting on the bench, but his eyes were distant now. He was seeing something far away that she could not share. My mother died when I was young, he said quietly. Cancer. It is a disease that eats the body from the inside. She fought it for 2 years before it finally won. I am sorry. Do not be. Those 2 years were some of the best of my life. She knew she was dying, and it made her fierce. She laughed louder and loved harder and squeezed every drop of joy from every single day. His voice grew thick, but he did not look away. She taught me that death is not the enemy. Wasted time is the enemy. Fear is the enemy. Death is just the door we all walk through eventually. Humans are strange. Yes, we are. But we are also alive in a way that your species has forgotten how to be. Liravel felt the words land somewhere deep in her chest. She had lived 300 years, and she could not remember the last time she had laughed. She could not remember the last time she had done anything simply for the joy of it. Her life was duty and order, and the slow march of centuries toward an end she refused to think about. You pity me, she realized. No, I envy you. How can you envy me? You are the one in the cage. Marcus stood up and walked toward the barrier. He stopped just inches from the energy field and looked into her eyes. You have centuries ahead of you. Centuries to learn and grow and change. You have time to make mistakes and fix them. You have time to find love and lose it and find it again. Time means nothing without knowing how to use it. Then learn. That is what time is for. She shook her head slowly. You say these things so easily, as if wisdom is something you can hand over like a gift. It is not wisdom. It is just honesty. He reached up and placed his hand against the barrier. The energy crackled around his fingers, but he did not pull away. I have maybe 1 more day to live. Maybe less. And I'm spending it talking to you because that feels like the right thing to do. Not because it will save me. Not because it will change anything. Just because this moment matters. One conversation cannot matter that much. Every conversation matters. Every moment matters. That is what your species has forgotten. His eyes were bright now. You lived so long that you have stopped paying attention. You let the days blur together because there are always more days coming. But there are not always more days. Not for me and not for you. The universe does not promise anyone tomorrow. Something hot and sharp pressed against the back of her eyes. She blinked rapidly and turned away. Silithians did not cry. Commanders certainly did not cry. You are trying to teach me something, she said. I am trying to give you something. A gift from a dying man to someone who has forgotten how to live. Why? Why do you care what happens to me after you are gone? He was quiet for a long moment. She heard him exhale slowly behind her. Because kindness does not need a reason. Because you gave me a viewport and let me see the stars one last time. Because you came to talk to me when you did not have to. His voice was gentle. Because you asked questions instead of just taking answers. She turned back to face him. The barrier hummed between them, but it felt thinner now. Like the distance it created was just an illusion. Ask me, he said. Ask me the question you have been carrying since we first met. This is your last chance. Her throat was tight. Her hearts were pounding. 300 years of discipline screamed at her to walk away. But she did not walk away. She stepped closer to the barrier and looked into his strange human eyes and asked, the question that had been burning inside her from the very beginning. Why are you not afraid? The question hung in the air between them. Liravel watched Marcus take a deep breath and close his eyes. For a moment, he looked older than his years. For a moment, He looked like someone who had carried heavy things across a very long road. Then he opened his eyes and smiled. "I am not afraid," he said slowly, "because I have already lived." She waited for more. When it did not come, she shook her head in frustration. "That is not an answer. That is a riddle. It is the only answer. The truest one I can give. Explain it to me. I have asked you honestly, and you promised me an honest response. Then listen carefully, because I will only say this once." He sat down on the floor of his cell and crossed his legs beneath him. The starlight fell around him like a silver cloak. "Your species lives for 500 years. Maybe more if you are lucky. That is a long time. A very long time. It is never enough. That is exactly my point." He looked up at her with those strange warm eyes. 500 years, and it is never enough. 1,000 years would not be enough. 1,000,000 years would not be enough. Because the problem is not how much time you have. The problem is how you think about time. Laravel lowered herself to the floor as well. She sat on the cold metal and faced him through the barrier. It felt right somehow. It felt like the kind of conversation that should happen at this level. "Go on," she said. "Humans live for 80 years. Sometimes less. Sometimes a little more. But always we know that the end is coming. We cannot hide from it or pretend it does not exist. From the moment we are born, we are already dying. That sounds terrible. It sounds terrible. But it is actually a gift." His voice grew soft. "Because we know our time is short, we learn to pay attention. We learn to notice the small things. The way sunlight feels on your face in the morning. The sound of rain on a roof. The smell of food cooking when you come home. The feeling of holding someone you love. These things are small. They do not matter. They are everything. They are the only things that matter." He leaned forward. "I have stood on a mountain at sunrise and watched the sky turn from black to purple to gold. I have held my daughter in my arms the day she was born and felt her tiny heart beating against my chest. I have laughed until I could not breathe and cried until I thought my heart would break. I have loved deeply and lost terribly and loved again, because that is what being alive means." Laravel felt something shifting inside her. Something old and hard was cracking under the weight of his words. "You speak of love as if it is worth the pain that follows. It is worth everything. Every single moment of pain is worth it." His eyes glistened in the starlight. "I buried my parents. I watched friends grow old and fade away. I said goodbye to people I thought I could never live without. And every one of those losses carved a hole in my heart that will never heal. Then how can you say it was worth it? Because the love came first. The joy came first. The loss only hurt so much because what came before was so precious." He placed his hand over his chest. "This heart has been broken 100 times, but it has also been full 100 times. And I would not trade a single moment of the fullness to avoid the breaking." She understood now. She understood in a way that made her want to scream and cry and laugh all at once. "You are not afraid of dying because you have already done the living. Yes, every moment you could have wasted on fear you spent on something better. Yes, and now at the end you can look back and see that it was enough. More than enough." Tears were streaming down his face now, but he was smiling. "I have had a beautiful life. A messy, complicated, beautiful life full of mistakes and victories and everything in between. I have touched other lives and been touched by them. I have left marks on the universe that will outlast my body. Your daughter, my daughter, and my friends and my crew and everyone I ever loved or helped or even just smiled at on a difficult day." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "We are not just bodies. We are ripples. Every kindness we show creates more kindness. Every love we give creates more love. The ripples spread outward forever, even after the stone has sunk. Laravel felt the hot pressure behind her eyes again. This time she did not fight it. A single tear rolled down her scaled cheek, and she let it fall. "I have lived 300 years, she whispered, "and I have not done any of that." "Then start now." "It is too late. It is never too late. Not while you are still breathing." He pressed his hand against the barrier, and the energy crackled around him. "You have 200 more years ahead of you. 200 years to stand on mountains at sunrise. 200 years to love and lose and love again. 200 years to leave ripples that will spread across the universe. You are dying tomorrow, and you are giving me advice on how to live. Who better? I have seen the end. I know what matters and what does not. And I am telling you that this moment right here is the only thing that matters. Not yesterday. Not tomorrow. Just this breath and the next one and the choice you make with each." She was crying freely now. 300 years of control and discipline melted away in the face of this strange, fragile human and his impossible wisdom. "I do not know how to start. You already have. You came here tonight. You asked questions. You listened." His smile was radiant despite the tears. "You let yourself feel something real. That is the beginning. That is everything." The starlight shifted around them as the ship moved through space. Somewhere in the distance, the processing station waited with its dark arms and its terrible purpose. But in this moment, none of that mattered. In this moment, there was only a human and a Silithian sitting on opposite sides of a barrier. Two beings from different worlds sharing something precious and rare. Connection. Understanding. Life. "Thank you," Laravel said. Her voice was broken, but her words were clear. "Thank you for giving me this." "Thank you for asking," Marcus replied. "It means more than you know." They sat together in the starlight, and neither of them moved. For the first time in 300 years, Laravel was exactly where she wanted to be.